Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Karenna Gore, and I am the director of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary. And we're very excited about this occasion. I'm going to say just a few opening remarks and introduce our author, our star guest, Catherine Coleman Flowers, and then we will have some music, some songs from one of our advisory board members, Bethany Yarrow, very excited, and then Catherine and I will sit down and have a little bit of a conversation, which we hope that you all will join with some questions. And then we have refreshments. So that's the plan for the evening. Hope that sounds great. I want to also be sure and thank some members of, well, first of all, Burke Library, particularly Matthew and Caro, and all of Union Seminary, and the team here doing the audio video from Riverside. And we're so happy to have the support of all of Union Seminary and also the Center for Earth Ethics, and in particular Jeannie Cooper Newton and Tim Cross and Allegra Lovejoy and Taylor Enlow and Ned Joyner and Emily Unterweger and Samira Siddiq and Veronica Raya. So thank you so much to all of you that helped to make this occasion. And this book is really fantastic. I am so excited to be, yay, thank you. It really, it's fascinating, it's important, it's deeply connected in so many ways to the strongest, most powerful values that this place and so many of the communities that are represented here hold dear, and it is absolutely timely. And so this is a really exciting occasion, and we will have much more to say about it. Let me introduce Catherine formally, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I know her as well. So Catherine Coleman Flowers is an internationally recognized environmental justice activist and founder of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. A MacArthur Genius Grant recipient, Flowers sits on the board of directors of the Climate Reality Project, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and RMI. She served as the vice chair of the inaugural White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and is a practitioner in residence at the Nicholas School of the Environment at Duke University. Flowers is also the author of Waste, One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret, and has written for the New York Review of Books and the New York Times, among other publications. There's actually a great piece by her in the New York Review of Books today. And I would add that Catherine Coleman Flowers was, for many years, a senior fellow at the Center for Earth Ethics. From about 2015 to 2020, and was absolutely a part of our foundation, a guiding light for the center, and has remained an advisor in many ways. We work together, and it's still unfolding. So I'm deeply grateful to Catherine for her leadership. I don't think it's an exaggeration at all to say that the values and the vision and the spirit that you will find in this book and that she carries and represents is what has is crucial to the world's ability to face the climate crisis. And I have seen her representing that, including at COP21 in Paris, that important meeting. And also in a workshop in her native Lowndes County, Alabama. So this is somebody who's very much in relationship and accountable to her community and family, and also is on the world stage in this important way. And I know her also as a military veteran, as a teacher, as a mother, as a grandmother, and as a friend. So I'm just absolutely delighted to introduce Catherine Coleman Flowers.
Try not to cry. This has been one of those moving days. Thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Union, and thank you to everybody that's here today. This book, I think part of the foundation got its start. Can't hear me? Is it better now? Okay. Part of the foundation was started 10 years ago when I met Corinna Gore. Actually, Corinna doesn't know this, but Corinna apparently had been to Selma, Alabama, and was looking for environmental activists. And I remembered that someone called me from Selma and said, oh, the vice president's daughter was here, and asking about environmental issues, and I forgot to tell her about you. But as God would have it, I was on the email chain, and Corinna saw my email address and wrote me herself. That's how we connected. So this book and this time is all about faith. When she and I met for the very first time, it was at Brown Chapel AME Church in Selma, Alabama. And then we sat on the lawn together the day that the President of the United States at that time, Barack Obama, came across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So I believe that all the things that happened from the time we met to even the time we had a ceremony, actually we talked about, I think when she was forming the Center for Earth Ethics, I came here to Union as part of the advisory group, and I met someone who also became instrumental in Andrew Swartz. And we talked about having a climate training in Lowndes County. And when we decided to do that climate training, we decided that we were also, because I learned from Corinna about the power of spirituality, and we decided to do a ceremony at a place in Lowndes County that's called Holy Ground. Can you make the connection now? So there, it was very, very powerful, where we were able to bring together spirituality and climate. And we talked about the people that did the ceremony, very similar to the ceremony that we had today when we faced the 4 directions. But we could literally hear the fish jumping out of the water because we were on the Alabama River. And we could also, during this ceremony, the birds flew over us and started to sing. And the soil that was collected that day, because if you go back and read about the Battle of Holy Ground, it was a sacred place to Native Americans at that time in Lowndes County. And the soil in my hands started to move. And I see that as something very, very symbolic as what has happened in my life since that time. And we ended up, that soil was placed in a cup and given to me. And Corinna, I have you know that I still have that soil today. And I believe that part of my success since that time, everything has happened because of what happened at Holy Ground. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more today in the power of faith.
Definitely. Yes. Okay. I just want to say one more word before Bethany gets up, because as Catherine mentioned, we met at the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. And for most people in this room know that the legacy of the civil rights movement is very, very dear to Union Theological Seminary, and the role that theological education and faith communities and grassroots activism played is something that we take extremely seriously here. And just in looking back on that memory and remembering at the time, and as Catherine writes about how incredibly dangerous and violent a place that could be, and how contentious and difficult that movement was to form. I know it has been expressed to me that those that showed up there to support, that is not forgotten. And that has included artists, musicians, and it included someone who just passed this past year, not long ago, Peter Yarrow. And I want to, from Peter, Paul, and Mary. And I just want to acknowledge that our dear friend, Bethany, and advisor Bethany, is very much an artist in her own right, but she's also somebody who has carried memories and legacies from that time and learned and taken that seriously as well. And so it's particularly meaningful that we're able to welcome her and thank her for giving us some songs. Catherine.
Thank you. So, it's very moving for me to be here. And my dad just passed. But my dad marched with Martin Luther King and sang these songs. And so it's really an honor to be here, to kind of recommit, all my ancestors too, on the ground praying for peace. And it's a very hard time right now for a lot of people to keep hope alive. But that's what we're here to do, and to sing together and to love one another, to pray for peace here and for justice and that hammer of justice and that spirit and that bell of freedom and the song about love. And my dad would say all the time, the answer is love. Now, what was your question? So our task is really just to love more deeply and love each other more and show up for one another and never stop singing. So please sing with me. These are songs from the Civil Rights Movement, songs that were sung marching across that bridge, and songs for all of us to carry us through.
Well, did you wake up this morning with your mind, Lord, was it? Set on freedom. Did you wake up this morning with your mind, Lord, was it? Set on freedom. Did you wake up this morning with your mind, Lord, was it? Set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, we're singing and praying with our mind, Lord, that on freedom. We're singing and praying with our mind, Lord, it is set on freedom. We're singing and praying with our mind, they are set on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Because of this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Whoa, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. Oh, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Everywhere I go. Everywhere I go. I can hear you. I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go. Everywhere will never stop. We'll never stop our singing, and we shall not be moved, just like a tree that stands by the water. We shall not be moved because of this little light of mine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, let it shine on holy ground. I'm gonna let it. She is gonna let it. We are going to let it shine. Never stop singing. Keep on marching. We are on holy ground. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are the microphones on and you all can hear us? It's a little hard to hear. So now it's a little bit better? That's better. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Catherine, there are so many questions I want to ask and so many comments I want to make. I thought perhaps what we could do is start with the image on the cover of this book, which is so powerful and I know has a story behind it. Could you share with us about this image?
Well, I can't take, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
1, 2. Can you raise the level of this a little bit so she doesn't have to put it quite so much on the mouth?
Okay, I guess you got me now. So actually, I can't take complete responsibility for this. I have to give credit to Julie Raw, my publisher, who actually chose that photo. But I think that I think that part of the inspiration is because Julie had also worked on, and I'm just speaking from what I think I know, one of the persons who inspired me with this was also Brian Stevenson. Mm-hmm. And as part of my work with EJI, I've done some soil collection. And I saw a connection between the soil collection that we did with EJI and the collection of the dirt at Holy Ground. So when she presented that picture to me, I thought she got it, dead on in terms of the relationship between what was holy then to our indigenous brothers and sisters in Lowndes County and what is holy and sacred now in terms of places where people were lynched and shed blood unjustly, and where we need to go in terms of the kind of faith that I'm trying to project here and the transformative power of faith. And I think that we need that so much so in that particular cover. I think it gives people to think about it. Okay.
So Catherine, you take us so many places in this book, and one of the places is your home and your family, and you're the oldest child of Maddie and J.C. Coleman, and the stories that you tell about them are so powerful. And I wonder if you could share with us a bit, bring them into the room so that people can have a sense of who they were.
Well, my parents were very community oriented. My mother was, I guess if I had to describe them, I think I talked about them in Waste as well, they were kind of like the jailhouse lawyers of the community. So everybody that had a problem would go to them to ask for help or advice. And my father was Perry Mason and my mother was Della Reese. That dates me. So, I mean, not Della Reese, but I can never remember Della's name, but Della was Perry Mason's assistant. But they taught me that whatever we had to share because there were 5 of us in terms of children. I was the oldest of 5. And they told us whatever we had to share it with each other, and we had to always love each other, and we had to love our community and love our family. And although we didn't go to church every Sunday to a full worship service, we went to Sunday school. And my father was a person who knew how to use a curse word because he was a soldier, but he also read the Bible every night. And for him not to be a preacher and have not gone to Union Theological Seminary, could quote the Bible, I still can't do that. But though my parents were very much a part of who I am today, and my mother was also an activist in her own right. So I wanted this book to be kind of a tribute. And a lot of people came through our household during the civil rights movement and would come whenever they came to Lowndes County to work. People that were part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they would come by my parents' house. And I think that some things we learn by osmosis, we think our children are not paying attention, but I guess I paid attention. And now here I am, and that's because of JC and Maddie Coleman.
And can you tell us a bit about, actually, the one thing I find very interesting is you said before that there was an origin of the Black Panther movement in Lowndes County. Could you tell more about that?
Yeah, so Lowndes County, for those of you that don't know where Lowndes County is, it's located between Selma and Montgomery. And at one point it was so violent, it was known as Bloody Lowndes. And when people, after the Voting Rights Act was passed, people wanted to organize for the right to vote, but there have been so many obstacles that were put in place, and students from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, led by Stokely Carmichael, came from all over the country to work with local people, and they organized their own political party because they could not run as Democrats or Republicans, because at that time the Democratic Party in the state of Alabama was racist, and it was known as the white man's party. So they organized their own party, and it was the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, and they took as their emblem the Black Panther. And at that time, because a lot of people could not read or write, because education for Black people in rural communities was limited, because all that, they still just found another way to take advantage of the labor through sharecropping, but they also limited the education. And consequently, to help people understand, they told them to remember the panther and to pull the tail for the panther when they went to the polls to vote. So it was one of those times when people actually, it was organized by local community with the guidance of students who were able to help them to at least set the stage for later, ended up taking over in the rural communities. The courthouse is very important because that's the seat of power, but to ultimately take 4 years later to take over the seat of power in Lowndes County and elect its first Black chair. So that is why Lowndes County and the Black Panther Party of Lowndes County actually predated the Black Panther Party in Oakland. And if you look at, there's a documentary now that tells that story that I think is on Paramount that talks about Lowndes County and Bloody Lowndes. And also Hassan Jeffries wrote about Lowndes County. So anytime I can, I try to put Lowndes County's correct place in history so people can understand the power of folk that had nothing but faith and hope, but they organized. They didn't win that first time, but they won that second time.
Thank you. And I feel the way that you have emerged as such a leader of not only environmental justice, but also the climate movement, is a way in which we can feel the power that you're describing of that movement. The issue of the climate crisis can seem so overwhelming, and the anxiety that people feel, the grief, can be so powerful, that to think back to what courage and fortitude that movement that you're describing and how it came about is such a gift to people today that are wanting to understand, how do you possibly find a counterforce to this? And you have written in this book, included quite a lot about the role that faith plays. You say that you said earlier you don't quote the Bible very well, but you have a lot of very powerful and very interesting references to Scripture in this book. And I would love for you to say a little bit more about that. And I guess I could start by saying I was very struck by how you opened it, about Judas and 30 pounds of silver. And it is, in a way, an opening to talk about human values and choices. Could you say more about why you opened the book with that particular story?
You know, I started thinking about this book more than 2 years ago. And, you know, again, this is, you know, all of this is a faith journey. And thought that the book would probably come out in the fall of last year. So, you know, I had to be driven by something greater than myself to write about this, for this book to be so timely right now. And I wanted to talk about Judas because Judas was a friend of Christ, and he sold him out. And I was thinking about all of there's so many references, especially political references, where people that were part of sacred institutions that are sacred to the American value system were taking trips and being paid to not carry out justice. And that's what motivated me to write about Judas. And all the politicians that I've seen to sell out, the community has hope in them and vote for them to get in place. And then somebody comes along with dark money. It's not so dark anymore. People now will come out and talk about it. And they still do the wrong thing and don't do right by the community. And since a lot of people tend to think that we are a nation supposedly based on Christian values, I wanted to remind people about Judas. And just because a person is saying they are religious or spiritual doesn't necessarily mean so, and they may not be in our best interest. So I'm hoping that for those that do read that chapter, that essay, they'll start applying it to their everyday lives, and let's use the same kind of, I guess, standard where we now judge Judas, to judge some of the Judases that supposedly represent America and don't. Mm.
One of the themes that I find, it's beautifully written, may I say, and you're such a wonderful storyteller, and it's full of unusual twists and turns. And one of the things that has stood out to me is I guess the theme being forgiveness or redemption, and the examples sometimes being stories of individuals, some of whom are quite well-known public figures, who you see not just guilt or blame or shame, but also some story of redemption and something, and even have worked with people, including, I don't know if you mind me saying, you know, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions is somebody that you had a dialogue with and that you write about in really interesting ways. And then going back further, you identify even with George Wallace, the Alabama politician, who took a path that included rethinking some things. Can you say more about that theme and those examples and what wisdom it might have for us in today's political climate?
Well, I think that it's possible to change. Just because someone is, I mean, let's think about Saul being changed to Paul on the road to Damascus, who was a persecutor of Christians. And we have examples of that in our lives today. But those people can also transform. And what I try to do is find some common ground where I can. Growing up in a red state, I had to learn how to be able to talk civil with folk that I didn't agree with a lot of things that they supported. And tried to find those things that we found in common, because I just kept, when I was working on my master's degree and reading a lot about the Holocaust. And one of the things that moved me a lot was seeing how some German people actually protected people that were Jewish. And even and there are examples of that during slavery. Those people that helped people to escape slavery along the Underground Railroad. And when Jeff Sessions and I, when we met, it was talking about poverty in rural communities. And he told me that he grew up poor in Wilcox County, Alabama. And that became the theme of our conversation. I said, well, I want you to help Lowndes County. And I can say without, any regret that he did help Lowndes County the time that he was in office. Actually, to the point that don't really tell the story in the book, but to the point that when Obama was elected president, his office called me and said, how many tickets do you want? Because we know you want to come. And they gave me tickets to go to the inauguration. When I got there, they had saved all of these, the pamphlets that I now treasure that were the program for that, for his inauguration. And then later, the other story that's more recent that I tell in the book is about Tommy Tuberville. So I had been asked to go to Washington because, the issue that I work on a lot is sanitation. And they were looking at increasing the funding in the...
And maybe you could say a word about that, since not everybody knows.
Okay.
But your first book, Waste, really goes into this work on sanitation. And do you mind telling people?
A lot of rural communities don't have sanitation. I mean, I grew up and I talk about this in Holy Ground, about growing up without running water in the house, and then later a cesspool that failed and a septic tank that failed. So a lot of communities have raw sewage on the ground. And the reason I won the MacArthur Award, because we did a study where we found that tropical parasites like hookworm was still existing, especially in Alabama, but I'm sure in other places where there's raw sewage on the ground. And I've fought, working with the Columbia Human Rights Law Center, we made this actually a human rights issue that got a lot of national and international attention. So when, in doing this work, I realized how much rural communities have been neglected across the United States. And the level of poverty is very different, even with my affiliation with the center and Union. I got a chance to go with Reverend Barber's group in the Kairos Institute. We actually went through Appalachia, and I saw a lot of rural poverty there. They looked like Lowndes County. It looked the same. So when I was asked to come and testify, before, actually it was Senator Booker's people that called me, Cory Booker, they called to ask me to go and testify as an expert about the sanitation issue, because they were working on trying to get the farm bill to include more money to pay for rural sanitation. So when I went there, what was really interesting was that to my right were the people that were selected by the Democratic chair of that committee. And then to my left were the people that were selected by the Republicans. Everybody that came in there came and told me, we're glad you're talking about this issue, including the people on the GOP side. And then I saw Senator Tuberville come in because I had been warned, oh, he may say anything, just be prepared. So I decided that I was going to go and introduce myself to him. Because I thought in my mind, this man coached young black men on football teams for these colleges and universities. That meant he had sat in many black families' homes and talked with them civilly. So therefore, whatever anxiety I had about it, I went up, introduced myself to him, and I said, Senator Tuberville, do you think that a septic tank should be, that when a septic tank goes into the ground and it fails within 2 years and there's no warranty, that the homeowner should be liable? He said, I think that's wrong. And he said, turn around, let's take a picture. We started taking pictures together. He introduced me to his staff. And then later, out of that, he and Senator Booker together collaborated and actually proposed an increase in the farm bill. It got to the point that some of my friends from one of the big greens that I'm on the board of called me and said, well, actually, I got a call from the senator's office saying, the Democrats don't believe because he's doing this with Tuberville, and they didn't want to support it. And that's the kind of, we have to get past those barriers. We have to get past that. And although I don't agree with everything Senator Tuberville says, but I think he was right on this issue. And we have to find ways, and what I did realize was that the people that showed up, most of the people that showed up at the hearing and testified that I thought would be attacking me were members of the GOP because they know who their constituents are. There are people in these rural communities that are poor. And we have to find a way to talk to each other. And I think that that's how we're gonna, that's the transformative nature of having faith, is being able to make that one step and let God make two. But also having these conversations with people we don't normally talk about. Because if these issues, we feel like if these issues don't impact us, we're not interested in them. But I think we should be, because now democracy is in jeopardy because we haven't been talking to each other enough.
Thank you. I want to get to one question I have about climate in particular before we open it up, but I also just want to say that what you just relayed, and this story is in the book, about your internal process of perception about the potential that Tommy Tuberville had to hear you, reflects a kind of intelligence, an emotional intelligence, or a sense of relationality that is so powerful, and I think you bring that to the understanding of ecology and climate and what it takes to build that movement, and I really want to get to that in a moment. But I also want to say that I asked you before about redemption and forgiveness and all of that, and there's a flip side of that that you also address, which is shame and secrecy and the role that plays in leaving so many injustices unaddressed. And it comes up for two different issues in the book. One of which is what you were talking about the people that live with raw sewage in their yard, and the other one has to do with a very sensitive and painful topic that you write honestly about in such an important way, and that is the forced sterilization of women and the history of that. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing more about that topic, and in particular the way in which you've been able to understand that shame and secrecy are holding injustices in place, and there's a way to release that in order to make things better. Sorry to talk so much, but
no problem.
I'm a big fan.
Well, so in the 70s, they discovered that there were some young women in Montgomery that had been sterilized. They were teenagers. And what I didn't know is that my own mother had been sterilized. The hospital where they were sterilizing black women in Alabama was John A. Andrew Hospital in Tuskegee. And my mother had 5 children. And when my brother was born, and it was a hospital for women that didn't have insurance. So what they were doing was saying to women that we're not going to deliver your baby unless you sign these papers and give us the right to sterilize you. So a lot of people were sterilized as a result. And in my mother's story, when she decided to speak out, she was hired as an activist for an organization to actually go into the community because women were ashamed to talk about it, to get them to tell their stories. Because there was a lawsuit, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I think at that time the ACLU was involved too, but they filed the lawsuit because they were using federal money to sterilize women. And it's so interesting because I have family members now who were born at the same time that my brother was born, my youngest brother. And there were no more children after them that was delivered by this doctor because he sterilized all of them. Without
even telling them or getting consent?
Some of them were not told at all. The children, the ref sisters, when they were sterilized, their parents didn't know. A social worker told them after it happened, but they didn't know. And in the case of a lot of the women that were from the Black Belt that went to this hospital, they didn't know. And I guess the irony about all of this, when people talk about what happened to our communities, which is why a lot of people don't trust medicine and doctors today, is that, during that same period or prior to that, the syphilis study was still going on. And it was just, just the type of racism that tend to exist when it comes to experimentation, and also, and it's really akin to what happens with environmental justice, where the dirty plants are placed next to the poor communities or placed next to the communities of color. And I see that disrespect for a woman's body is being akin to how we feel about Mother Earth. And the people that don't care about a woman's body don't care about climate change either. We need to be concerned.
Thank you. Well, that is actually a powerful connecting point to asking you about the moment that we're in now with climate. We've had these fires raging in Los Angeles, and we know the pattern that we're in, and you have been part of conversations about what to do about climate change in many venues, as I said at the beginning. I also really love the way that you write about it in this book, and I wanted to just read a little bit about a little passage about how deeply interconnected and global our roots are. And as we share roots, so too do we share the consequences of a warming planet and the environmental devastation that we have wrought. Those longitudinal, multi-generational essences that determine who we are mirror across the same span of time the terrible violence that has been exacted by the climate and the environment. The extreme weather, the rising seas, the fires, and terrible heat, they may appear in particular spots on the globe, but none can be siloed off by country or continent, by class or privilege, or yes, by race or ethnicity. As far as climate was concerned, to turn the cliche on its head, one could not think only locally, one had to think globally. Climate change is occurring always, everywhere, all at once. Our carbon footprint does not have boundaries. Rising seas do not respect national interests. Inadequate infrastructure will compromise every part of a community. Smoke in Alberta, Canada will turn the sky of North Alabama, thousands of miles away, orange. The urgency of my work became even more informed by the feeling of being connected. What words of guidance do you have for those of us here that want to be part of facing this crisis in a positive way today?
Well, I think that we can draw from examples, at least let me rephrase that. I draw from examples from my own faith tradition. And I think each of us have faith traditions that we can see examples of people that dealt with insurmountable obstacles. Growing up in Alabama, you know, I was always told stories like Jonah in the belly of the whale, or, you know, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. I mean, those things gave me power. And I think that we have to look to those type of examples today to get through these hard times. And we also have to find something, we may have to fight differently. You know, when I know where I am when I'm in Alabama, so I fight differently. But I also have found people that feel the same way about the change. I mean, I have met people that are Republicans that know that climate change is real. I have met people that are Democrats that doubt it. So I think that we have to find a way to bridge these gaps. I think that all of us are in a position to educate someone. But let's start it with where they are first. Because I think when we go in and start attacking people without trying to figure out where they are and help them to understand, we lose them. And we can't lose them to people that are feeding them misinformation. We can't afford that. So I think that one, we must continue to pray in whatever your tradition is. I feel like, you know, when you're praying, you're putting on an armor to go into battle. Because we're going to have to go into battle. And also turn to each other for support. By doing that, and I think in this audience, there's some here that have stories that you should write, that I need to be coming to your book signing, because your stories can inspire someone else. And that is that's how I seek guidance, by trying to inspire other people, but also draw inspiration from people that are around me. And then try to find someone that I don't necessarily completely agree with, but try to have a conversation with them and try to understand, because even my own personal understanding, I have moved my acceptance of a lot of things that I thought I would never accept. But I had to change. So I take that to mean that people can change also. And if you get nothing else out of Holy Ground, know that people can be transformed. And I try to, in each and every essay, talk about the power of transformation. But we have to believe that. And that's where the faith comes in.
Okay, so we do have time. Would you be willing to take a couple of questions? Yeah. We also do have some food, which I believe will begin to be passed around, but we hope that you all will enjoy the food and the drinks starting now, but also to invite the questions, and I see a hand up back there. Wait, should we get a microphone, do you think? Or? No, okay, so we can't hear is the problem. Okay.
Well, okay, I'm number one tonight, so good evening. I'm number one. I'm Peter Smith, and I'm sorry for being late. My question is about the racial justice. My question is how do you going to fight against coming for fighting for racial injustice with the climate?
How are you going to fight for justice for the climate?
Okay. Well, I think that having these kinds of conversations help us to at least think about how we move to fight. And then there are personal things we can do. We can work on our own carbon footprint. You know, we can live a more conscious life in terms of choices that we make, how we use plastics, whether or not we're going to get whether or not we're going to get the car that's a hybrid or whether we're going to get the car that's the EV. There are lots of decisions and choices that we can make. Or whether or not we're going to grow our own food. I mean, a lot of people are moving back to that now where you can use containers and grow some food, not everything. But I think there are conscious choices we can make. But I think we also have to vote. We're going to have to vote. We can't count on folk to vote for us. We're going to have to get out there and vote ourselves because a lot of people stayed home or they thought it was going to turn out a different way. And if we don't do that, then we're going to keep doing this over and over again. But we also have to ally. I mean, we've allied as an organization. We've allied with Barbados because the Prime Minister of Barbados is the spokesperson for the Global South as it relates to climate change. And we have to find like-minded people, and it's easier now, and I'm going to do a shameless plug for one of the organizations whose board I'm on. Also go, and if you want to learn more about what you can do, go to some of the trainings of the Climate Reality Project. They can give you a lot more information than I can give you on how we can fight it, especially how we can fight it at this particular time.
Thank you so much, and I agree. And they have a website, Climate Reality Project. There's a wonderful chapter on food in your book. So for those that want to hear more from Catherine on that topic, and of course on the voting, as you mentioned before, coming from Lowndes County, coming from that level of struggle for getting a vote, it's really so moving to watch how you write about fighting voter suppression, fighting gerrymandering. There's a wonderful passage in the book where you have a transcript from a trial where Reverend Barber was being questioned because he was in an action to resist voter suppression. And it's so fabulous. I won't say more. It's a teaser. So you all can look forward to it. But there's another question, I think. I see two. So we'll start here and then back there. Next.
I told you before I have about 1,000 questions, but I'm going to hold it down to one, I think. I'm 42 years old, and I don't remember a time in my life when politics has been as polarized. Have you seen behind scenes in Washington, people more coming together and willing to actually collaborate and work on certain issues as you do, and actually willing to meet in the middle and not be as dug in as they are on television every day.
Well, you know, we're like 1 week in, so, but I do know just based on the work that we do in our part of the country, we have met with local officials in the city where our office is located. And one of the things that struck me about the mayor of that city, he was talking about how to have Airbuses to move people in from the outlying areas coming into the city to work. And he drives an EV himself. And we had a discussion about where do you put charging stations? Because he was concerned about, and he was walking the walk. He wasn't just talking just to be complaining, but he was concerned about where do you put these charging stations? Do you put them in the garage? Do you put them on the street? And do we have the capacity if there's a fire? Because it's a different way to put that type of fire out than a regular fire. So this is in Alabama, and he has this kind of thought process, which is great, because one of the things that's going to force us to come together is climate change. Because when I first moved to Madison, Alabama, which is right next door to Huntsville, I had to spend a lot of time in my closet because I didn't have a storm shelter. And a selling point for houses in 2021, 2022, and 2023 was having a storm shelter, because the tornadoes were happening so often. And I think that climate change, as I wrote about it, doesn't care who we are, how much money you have, none of that. And it's going to force us to reckon with what we're hearing and what we're dealing with. And some of the policies that I think are being floated out there are going to bring people together when they realize how much suffering it's going to cause.
Thank you. There's a wonderful section of the book on NASA as well, and the connection to Huntsville, Alabama, where you live now, and just a lot of wonderful history that I didn't know about Ralph Abernathy and his question to NASA. Can you say a word about that? And then we'll go to Susan.
Yeah, so actually, when I first got connected with the New Poor People's Campaign.
Which was partially out of Union. And anybody here from the Kairos Center? We love the Kairos Center here at Union.
So I was given and I used to have it in my living room. It was a picture of a mule as part of the mule train for the New Poor People's Campaign. And they actually went to, they were protesting the money that was put into, outer space, and Ralph Abernathy had a conversation with the director of NASA at that time, that actually when they launched a space flight, there were people from the Poor People's Campaign that were present. And the reason that we moved to Huntsville, our organization moved away from Montgomery, Alabama to Huntsville, is because, I don't know, how many of you saw Hidden Figures? Okay? That movie inspired me, because there are some things that we can learn from space that can help make life a lot better. They have to deal with carbon in the space capsules too. They have to figure out how to get rid of it. And in addition to that, Huntsville's history is different because of Operation Paperclip. How many people have ever heard of that? Very few people. Read the book. You learn how they brought a lot of people that were Nazi engineers to Huntsville, to other parts of the U.S. too, but definitely to Huntsville. And Wernher von Braun, who was one of the masters of the space program. The rockets that were raining down on Europe, he and his scientists helped to create them, but they also used them at the Redstone Arsenal, and later laid the foundation for the space program. here in the United States. And when George Wallace was trying, and he recruited students, he changed himself. He recruited students, engineers from HBCUs to work for NASA. And George Wallace wanted to use Huntsville and NASA as a staging ground for some of his policies at the time when he was a segregationist. And Von Braun wouldn't have anything to do with it, and they said he didn't come back to Huntsville anymore after that. George Wallace did. That's just another story of how people can change. And I think we all need to hear those stories, especially right now. Because some hearts can change. Some probably never will. They'll be held bound, but there are a few that could potentially change. But that Huntsville story, I think, is one that we can draw hope from.
Fascinating. Susan?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much. I think I needed to meet you today and to hear the things you had to say, because it was a wild day filled with so much aggression. And to come here and hear you talk about faith and dialogue and story and how you can put that together for the good of the world was actually beautiful.
Thank you.
And I thank you. I think that's my question is how do I get to be like you, or how do I find that resilience, and how do we deal with the fact that there's this anger, this aggression is floating through our society, sometimes disguised as faith.
Yes. Wow. Well, sometimes, well, for me, I sometimes have to think before I speak. And if I react, and I was told once that when a person has you reacting to them, they're in control. So we have to stop sometimes and think about how we respond before we respond. Because I'm sure that some of what is happening now is predicated. I mean, they're doing it on purpose because they want us to have a certain kind of reaction. But I think that this is a time for us to think about how we respond. And I feel, just based on conversations that I've had with people that are around me every day, and also my friends and others that, I mean, because a lot of people have been calling now and wanting to, comfort and inspiration, we have to draw from our friends and our support system to remain sane as we go through this. But the other part is when I can't find the right answers from the people that I know, sometimes you have to get on your knees and pray and hope that answer comes.
Thank you. Okay, and I think we probably have time just for maybe one or two more. Oh, there you go. Okay, Thomas.
Hi, it's Thomas. Thank you for coming, Catherine. So my question, considering we're here in the academy here at Union, in the school, given the climate emergency, the urgency of the climate emergency, I think that a lot of folks, particularly students, feel that sense of urgency and timing and what can we do right now in order to help address the issue. So my question, kind of piggybacking off of yours, is how do you reconcile the urgency of the emergency with the sometimes snail's pace of coalition building to get to that?
Well, and I like to add another component to that is a just transition. I think that as we talk about the climate emergency and where we are and where we need to be, we also have to be mindful of the fact that we do this in a thoughtful way, not built on the kinds of constructs that have created the inequality that still exists in this country. And in doing so, I think that we have to start hearing the stories of people that have been screaming in the wilderness for a long time, people like Sharon Levine down in St. James Parish. You know, if we want some urgent things to do, I think maybe this is the time for us to be in a mood of learning. And maybe part of this academia at this time should be to go down there and spend some time with the folk and learn how they have built that resilience to exist in Cancer Alley all these years when people weren't paying attention to Cancer Alley. Or to go to Lowndes County and find John Jackson, who as a 17-year-old was the one that invited Stokely Carmichael to, actually his family, Stokely was on the campus passing out flyers about the SNCC meeting, and John saw him and took the flyer home to his parents. They went to the meeting that night, and his family invited SNCC to come and stay on their property, and it became the SNCC Freedom House. Those people are still alive. I think we can learn something from them, because that's how I was able to grow and build my resilience, because I was able to make connection with them and learn about community. I think sometimes we do things for expediency and we hurt people unintentionally. And I think sometimes we discount what I call local ingenuity. People that know how to survive and get things done, that may not have been able to put it in a book, but they're out there. And for my advice to young people is find somebody like that and ask them that same question. And they may have an answer for you, better than the one that I'm giving right now. But I think that you can find people that can keep you centered and focused as we go through what we're going through right now. I mean, one person I ran into yesterday was Stacey Abrams. I saw her in the airport, and she was moving real fast, and I said, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity, because I've seen her before, and I was scared to approach her. So I approached her, and it shocked me when I approached her, and she stopped, and she said, and I said, I told her who I was, and she said, I know who you are. And I almost cried then, too. I cry all the time. I almost cried then because I was like, this woman is an icon to me. And she's going through something too, because she's in Georgia. I don't know what you've read lately about what she's going through and how she's being punished for the work that she's done to get people registered to vote. But I didn't see anything on her face yesterday to suggest that she was worried about that. I think she's still going to be Stacey Abrams, and she's still going to do what she does. And that's what we have to do. In spite of the adversity that we're dealing with right now, in spite of the climate crisis and the urgency of it, we still have to continue to do the work. And there are other ways. I saw where Bloomberg stepped up today and said that he was going to pay for the U.S., the financial part of the U.S. responsibility. What happened the last time, because this happened before when we came out of the climate agreement, the city stepped up, organizations stepped up, individuals can step up, and the United States still met a lot of its goals despite the fact that we were no longer part of the Paris Agreement. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not, but that was a two-pronged approach to how we stay centered while we continue to fight.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know we have one more. I just want to say, you know, Catherine, you were in Paris when the Paris Agreement was decided, was agreed upon, that historic agreement that the United States has now abandoned officially again. You were part of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council in this way that environmental justice really became a centerpiece of the agenda of the previous administration. You were on the White House lawn with President Biden speaking in a way that showed how it made it to the center of the last administration's agenda. And now this president has just rescinded the executive order that established the environmental justice as that level of priority. And what I hear in your answer is that there's a higher authority that we're working under than whatever could be rescinded by these things. And there's been a lot of this faith that has come through here. And I think that also just the notion of justice and what a powerful force that is can also be an article of faith in that way. And I just want to thank you for that. And I think we just have time for one more. I'm looking for my okay, one more.
Hey, Ms. Flowers, good to see you again. My question really is just around hope and just remaining hopeful in a time right now. As you know, it's very daunting. I'm a law student here at Columbia, and it's particularly an interesting time to be studying the law right now. It's just constantly in flux as we see just in this first week alone. And what I have seen or gleaned from a lot of my peers is this loss of fire that they maybe once had when the purpose that they entered law school and things of that nature. And so as a young person in this generation, and piggybacking off of Thomas's question as well, as far as, you know, being someone who's optimistic, wanting to do this type of work, how do I continue to instill hopefulness in my classmates and peers and other people in this space that may have lost a little bit of the flame that they once had, given the unprecedented time that we may be in right now?
Well, the only thing I can say is to keep fighting. I mean, we have to keep fighting. We can't roll over. You know, a lot of young people are concerned because they stopped the all the financial help, and a lot of young people in school depending on student loans and so forth, and we're afraid of that. But before we came up here, I looked at my phone and saw that a federal judge they stayed that today. So there is still, keep in mind that there are still people on the bench that believe in justice. Not everybody. So, but we'll never get to that justice if we don't have attorneys like you fighting for it. So stay in the fight, stay in school, continue to fight, and let them know that the only way they win is that there's nobody out there fighting. And we may not win every battle, but we could win a lot of them. But if we don't fight, we definitely will lose. Stay in the fight.
All right, thank you. So, thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you everyone for coming, and please enjoy the refreshments. Please buy a book. I believe that you've agreed to sign.
Yes.
Table for signing in the back. Thank you so much, Catherine. One more round of applause.